Hello everyone and welcome back to Wildcat MTG. Today we're going to talk a little MTG Finance and I'm going to share with you all some of my recent pickups at GP Las Vegas. My headliner being that I was able to acquire a Gaia's Cradle, which was something I really had on my wish list. And I will share with you what I gave up to acquire the Gaia's Cradle. So let's do a little of the background first. While there is no technically official organized Wizards play, in November 19th through 21st, Channel Fireball did put on a double main event, Magic the Gathering event, and which I was able to attend. I have to say, beyond just the paper Magic play and just being surrounded by thousands of other Magic players, which is a truly wonderful experience, one of the things that I missed as somebody who enjoys not just playing the game, but also collecting and investing in the game is the vendors. The fact that when you have these large scale events that basically any card you can think of that you want is probably for sale somewhere in that building. And so for me, at the top of my list, something that I kind of wanted for myself in my personal collection was a Gaia's Cradle. So that's where we'll start this story. I will provide you a list and show you kind of how the math and how I worked through it and how I was able to acquire it. And I will let you decide whether you think that I got a good deal or whether you would have kept the cards and maybe sought alternative resources to acquire one if that was something I really wanted. So let's go ahead and dive in. So we'll start off by showing you a picture of the actual Gaia's Cradle that I was able to inevitably obtain. And I really wanted for myself a copy that was in really, really good condition. I figured if I was going to allocate resources, whether that be cards out of my collection or directly money out of my wallet, that I wanted one that was going to be in pretty pristine condition. So I think we got there with that. But I will say that part of the premise of this exercise was to come out of pocket using actual money as little as possible and primarily see if I could actually basically just trade my way there. So when we look at this exercise and we go through this exercise, I will say that mathematically we are going to round up and down a little bit. It's just easier, I think, to talk in round numbers rather than get too granular. I hope to provide you some visuals that will give you some ideas as to what I actually gave up and let you guys decide for yourselves whether you think that I made the right choices or not. But we will round up and down just to kind of keep it at a higher level here. So I'll start off by saying on day one of the event, I did bring with me a small binder. It was mostly odds and ends from Commander Legends and Time Spiral Remastered stuff that I wasn't particularly emotionally attached to. And the value of that binder was about $200, of which I ended up selling off pretty much everything in that binder and getting about $120 cash back, which, if you're doing the math, is about 60% of the actual market value. I thought that this was a good jumping off point, and really what I was doing on day one was mostly scouting out the vendors, seeing who had what cards, who was taking cash, what their buy lists were looking like. Really, it does behoove you, if you're going to be doing shopping at one of these events, to do your homework, to look around to see who's purchasing cards for what. So I took a lot of pictures to see who was buying what cards for what prices, who was doing cash, who was doing trade only, who was offering trade bonuses. And that allowed me to then gear up for the second and third day of the event when I brought more goodies with me. So day three is when I decided to make my move, and that night prior, I had put together a binder that had approximately $2,700 in value. So what this visually that you're seeing on screen right now, I reconstructed from memory and some notes that I had made for myself. So I was fairly confident on what cards were in that binder. However, upon recreating it, I knew that I was short because I knew that the total the market value, of that binder was about $2,700, which I realized to be about right around $211. That was all in foils, and why that's important will come up in just a moment here. But we did end up going to day three with a binder with about $2,700 in market value worth of cards in it. I had brought some extra with me just in case I thought there was maybe a shot for me to make a run at a pretty beat up, super damaged Mox or something along those lines. And so that's where we're going to jump off in the next part of this. So what you are seeing on screen here is an actual visual representation of the cards that I had in that binder. Again, remember there is about a $211 discrepancy in some foils that I couldn't recall offhand and didn't have notes for. But those were mostly odds and ends, a lot of like $5, $6, $7, $10 foils. Nothing huge there. So I sat down with one of the vendors that was actually offering cash, and I found their prices to be the most competitive. And so he started scrolling through my binder and picking stuff out, and I noticed that he was actually skipping past a lot of the foils. And it wasn't until we got to the very end of the transaction that he actually said, "Hey, I some of the stuff I really enjoy, but actually we don't buy foils, so we only buy non-foils." So that ended up being, in a strange way, working towards my favor, but you can see there that there's a lot of stuff that they weren't interested in as a result. So after we remove all the foils from consideration, what we had left over was $1,350 worth of cards, at which point began going over pricing and what they were offering. There was a couple of instances where a couple cards they just weren't interested in that were even non-foil. On the Fury Borderless, they were essentially offering the same price that they were for the regular, so I decided to hang on to the Borderless Fury. And that they decided that they were not interested in the Unlimited Psionic Blast. So after that, and after we removed those cards from consideration, what we had left over then at that point was a market total of about $1,278. Of the $1,278 in cards selected, I received a cash offer of $1,060 or 83% of market value, which I gladly accepted. Taking into account the $120 previously banked from a prior sale, that brought us to a total of $1,180, which was going to be more than enough bargaining power that I needed to pick up a Cradle. But I wasn't done then. After all, I did, in addition to the cash, still have a binder full of foils. That was about $1,350 in market value. And in a lot of ways, I was relieved that that particular vendor wasn't interested in foils, because there was definitely some things in that binder that I had emotional attachment to and I really didn't want to part with unless there was something like a Mox on the line or at stake. With that being said, I decided to take that binder, remove from that consideration the things that I was interested in hanging on to for myself long term and keeping in my personal collection. And then I went and tried my hand with another vendor using the remainder of the foils that I actually wasn't interested in bringing back home with me. So the result of that transaction looked like the following. Taking into consideration that extra $211 in foils that we had in there, our binder total was approximately $485, of which I received a cash offer of $265 for those remaining cards, or about 55% of market value. So this gives us a good time to go ahead and do a little quick summary of where we're at. The total amount gained from the sale of my cards came out to be $1,445, which was going to be more than enough needed to purchase a Gaia's Cradle. Ultimately, I was able to find a vendor selling a pretty good conditioned Gaia's Cradle for a cost of $1,000. I offered $900 cash, which they then accepted. The market value on the card at the time was $1,120, and this left me $545 cash, which I then promptly left and went home with, and definitely did not spend on more Magic cards. Okay, I totally spent it on more Magic cards, so let's go ahead and take a look at those as well. Another card that really caught my eye was a foil extended art Meat Hook Massacre. This is a card I really like, and having the coolest variant of it seemed like something that I would want for my personal collection. I was able to find one for a price of $50, which seemed like a great value, so I went ahead and picked up a copy, and this left us $495 left to play with. Next up, we have Lake of the Dead, and for me, this is a card that it is reserve list, and it's something that I wanted from my own personal collection, just to say that I owned a copy of. I was on the hunt for a really near mint condition version, but I really couldn't find one that I was comfortable paying that market value for, so ultimately I opted for a lesser condition, but also a lesser price. This one I think is somewhere probably between light play and moderate play, but at a cost basis of $75, something I certainly couldn't complain about, and that did leave us $420 to play around with. And last but certainly not least, we have a Bayou. This is from a revised. I saw it and I looked at the condition of it, and ultimately the price felt like it was a little bit too good for me to pass on. The market value on this card at the time was probably just under $600 or right around $600, and the asking price for it was $400. The condition on this card seemed to be pretty immaculate overall, and I know you can't see the backside of it, but you can clearly see the front, and the centering is pretty good, so I decided to go ahead and move in on it and get it. So here's a summary of all that took place, but I'd love to hear your feedback as well. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.